All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D and D Did a Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So today, we are going to be exploring the world of the dawns. Something that I actually have some very, very minor training in due to the fact that I was a stage actor. So specifically, one who performed in musicals. So I have an extremely tiny bit of dance training in the idea that I can do some ballroom dancing. Specifically the waltz, and at one point I could mambo very, very poorly. But that's not what we're talking about in this particular case. This particular case, we're talking about the dancer class from Final Fantasy XIV. Let's just kind of dive into this one. The dancer class itself is kind of interesting, to be honest. Excuse me for 1 second. Just realized I don't have a drink. So, as I drop everything, the dancer class is kind of interesting, to be blunt. The class itself has not shown up often in Final Fantasy. The first time I'm aware of it showing up is actually in Final Fantasy V. It was one of the classes that you got from the Fire Crystal, if I remember correctly. It was one of the two, I believe, that were shot off. Or it might be one of the three that you get right when it... Anyway, I believe it was a Fire Crystal job. And the dancer was a weird job because their command in Final Fantasy V was dance. And what it did was there was a number of dances they could do. They were chosen at random. And some of them were actually really useful. You had Swords Dance was probably the most useful, where what it was is you would just make an attack with whatever weapon you had active, but it would be for a lot more damage than that weapon normally would do. There was another one called, I think it was like the Beguiling Waltzer. This is something that would actually charm one of the monsters, which was sometimes kind of fun. There's one that could actually steal hit points. Overall, it was a very RNG dependent class, and there wasn't a ton of things that the dancer got that were really useful when you paired them off with other classes. Other than the dancer, if you maxed it, you got the ability to equip the ribbon. The ribbon in Final Fantasy V was the ultimate headpiece because it made you immune to all status changes. So it was super useful, and I believe only dancers could wear it. So having that was remarkably useful, but beyond that, like, you really didn't use it. Dancing in general didn't really show up again in a main series game until I think there might have been a Final Fantasy XI class that dealt with dancing in some way. And then in Final Fantasy X-2, there was a dancer, it's just a subclass, but it was effectively the bard, and it worked nothing like the dancer in Final Fantasy V. And then we get to Final Fantasy XIV, where the dancer was introduced in Shadowbringers, which is the most recent expansion as of this recording. Endwalker, the next expansion comes out in November, I believe. So you've got a little over a month before we get to deal with that stuff. But Dancer was introduced a couple years ago now, and it's a unique class in Final Fantasy XIV. It is a physical ranged DPS, which basically what that means is they don't use magic to do their damage. They do something physical. Very akin to they're in the same kind of class as machinists and I think bards as well, because the damage that they deal is physical. It's not based on magic. And it's interesting. I personally have not played a dancer. But I actually, in order to make this video, I actually watched some guides on how you play your dancer and things like that. And the dancer is similar to the bard in the idea that it is kind of RNG focused. Basically, your main combo is actually only a two-step combo. In Final Fantasy XIV, most classes have a three-step combo. You have a first, a second, and a third, and each one buffs the next one. The dancer technically only has a two-step combo, from what I understand. If I'm getting this wrong, and you actually play a dancer, put it in the comments down below. But they have multiple procs, basically multiple things that have, from what I've read, have about a 50% chance of happening whenever you use something that will activate different abilities. So you have two abilities that always combo off each other, and then the first ability can proc one thing. The second ability can proc a completely different thing. And so, unlike most DPS classes where you have kind of a set order, which they call a rotation, of everything you do, the dancer, you're constantly changing your rotation based on what is active and what isn't. And then they have two gauges, which again, I'm actually gonna look. I'm actually gonna look this stuff up, so I don't say the wrong thing. But they do have two gauges that you use. Stab it. Sorry, my computer's doing weird things. The first one is the step gauge. They actually have an ability that you have two different abilities: standard step and technical step. And basically, what they are, from what I can see here, one is an upgraded. Technical looks like an upgraded version of standard step. But basically, you hit standard step, and then four of your attacks turn into different steps, effectively different dance moves. And your gauge will list two of those dance moves in an order. And if you do them, if you press the buttons in the right order, you will give yourself a buff and do area damage. The same is true about technical step, though it does more damage, and it takes 4 steps instead of 2. But basically, that's the kind of the main thing that they're doing on a regular basis, is doing this step gauge. Whenever it comes off a cooldown, it's on a 30-second cooldown, and then they randomly push the buttons to do area damage and get that buff for damage. And then the other gauge they have are called fourfold feathers and esprit. And basically, fourfold feathers are just literally these little feather icons that you use to cast certain weapon skills. So it's just another limited resource. And then esprit is another resource that's actually generated not only from you, but from your dance partner. We'll talk about that in just a second. And as soon as you have enough of it, you can use one more thing called Saber Dance. So there's technically they have two different things that they track. They have the fourfold feathers and the esprit, and then they have their steps that they don't technically track. They just watch to see if it's on cooldown, and if it's not, they use it. So as complicated as it sounds, when you're actually playing it, from what I gather, again, I haven't played the class, it flows a lot better than it sounds. The other unique thing about the dancers, they have this thing that I can't remember what the ability is called, but they get to pick a dance partner. Basically, what happens is when they pick their dance partner, it's a link between them and one other person. And I'm going to see if I can actually find the ability. Shield Samba, closed position. There we go. Closed position is the ability that they use to designate their dance partner. And basically what it does is when you are their dance partner, The bonuses they get, that damage increase that you get from doing your step moves, your technical step or your standards as a step, that's also given to the dance partner. And the dance partner will actually generate Esprit for you, so you can use that. And there's a couple other abilities, like Curing Waltz, which is a way for them to heal themselves, will also heal their dance partner. So it's kind of a unique thing in Final Fantasy 14 that you get to effectively link yourself with another person for an extended period of time. Closed position doesn't end until you actually end it. So this is, you start at the beginning of the dungeon, you give it to your partner, and then they're your partner the entire dungeon. Compared to some other abilities, like the Dragoon has an ability that links them with someone else and gives them both a buff. But it's it lasts for like 10 or 15 seconds. So yeah, that's kind of how the Dancer plays in Final Fantasy 14. It's a unique class. It's nothing like the earlier iterations of Dancer, in the idea that you really didn't know what they were going to do, and it was all dependent on what randomly came up. There is that RNG aspect in there, kind of like the Bard, where they're built on procs. They're built on things that will randomly activate when you use another ability. However, since the activations are, there's a 50% chance of the thing activating when you use the skill that would possibly activate it. It's not quite as random as the Bard is. So yeah, it's a unique class. Now, as far as the 5th edition version of it, again, I'm going to give the disclaimer right here towards the beginning of the video. I realize we've been talking for 12 minutes already. But the Dancer as it is written doesn't work because it's a Rogarian. It's a Rogarian Aladdin, kind of, in the fact that it's got quite a few abilities that are just taken word for word from the Rogue. It's got one ability taken from a Barbarian. It's got half spellcasting. It's got some other weird things. Like, it's literally just a conglomeration of abilities that already exist in other classes, and then a couple really weird ones that don't make sense. And so because of that, it doesn't work because, again, I've mentioned this before. If you decide to create a new class, and part of creating that new class is just taking an ability from another class and shoving it into this one, it's not going to work. Because that ability is designed to work with that class. That's how 5th edition is designed. Especially if you're taking things like defining features of other class and just shoving them into a new one without all the support of the rest of the abilities of that class, it's just not going to work. Because, again, that entire class and all the subclasses are built around that defining feature. And now you're just taking it and putting it in a different one, and it just doesn't work. Now, that being said, there actually is a defining feature that is unique to the Dancer in this, that this class could totally be built around, and it seems to have just been ignored after they introduce it. And relegated to kind of like this is cool as well. So when I do the final thoughts on this, I'm actually going to talk about how you could build this class around the actual really interesting defining feature that was put in here that is unique, instead of just stealing features from other classes and hoping that it works. So, that being said, let's dive into this class. First thing we're going to cover, class features. Just the basics of how the class works. It's a D8 damage die, meaning this has some of the lower hit points on the spectrum of hit points you can have. But it actually, I believe a D8's the same thing as a rogue. So with the fact that it took all its abilities, or most of its abilities from the rogue anyways, makes perfect sense. Proficiency is light armor. I don't know why they have that proficiency, because we'll talk about why they would never wear it ever. Weapons, chakrams, which don't exist. Rapier, scimitar, short swords, simple weapons, and whips. The interesting thing about the weapons that they're proficient with is as the class is built, one of the defining features of this class that they stole from the rogue will not work with the vast majority of the weapons they're proficient with. So that's interesting. They get no tool proficiencies, saving throws, dexterity, and charisma, which kind of makes sense. Dancers, performance, charisma. And then skills, choose 2 from acrobatics, deception, insight, perception, performance, and persuasion. There are too many P's in that area. Equipment, they start with either 2 daggers or 2 chakrams. Again, chakrams don't exist. They will deal with that in just a second. They also get a whip or a scimitar, a set of bracelets and anklets for spellcasting. We'll talk about that in a second. A set of clothes, a costume or light armor, and then an explorer's pack or an entertainer's pack. Now, chakrams, they have created a new weapon type, which I'm totally fine with, and I actually like how they did it. They say here, for chakrams, I suggest using the hand axe stat blocks. Set the cost to 15 gold pieces and add the finesse quality to the weapon. It actually works really well. Hand axes already have the thrown property. If you add the finesse property to them, that means a dexterity-based class can use the hand axe. It does slashing damage, which is what a chakram should do. And they deal with the fact that hand axes don't come back to you later on in the class. So overall, I like the idea that this is how they've created chakrams. They didn't create a brand new weapon. They just go, use hand axe. Use something that's already there. Add one tiny change to it to make it work for this class. And that's all you need to do. It's super simple. This is super easy and a perfect example of how to use the tools that are already present in the system to give you something a little bit different by just adding some flavor and a minor tweak. The finesse quality does not make massive differences in Dungeons & Dragons aside from when you're talking about rogues. Because rogues require a weapon that has the finesse property in order to make their sneak attacks. So adding finesse to just anything could mean that rogues could sneak attack using a great axe. Which would unbalance the class. However, the only difference between a hand axe and a scimitar is you can throw a hand axe, you can't throw a scimitar. It's the only difference between them. They use the same damage type, they do the same damage. So adding the finesse quality to the hand axe really doesn't change a ton. The rogue can already use almost an identical weapon to do the exact same thing. So I don't really have a problem giving hand axes finesse. Also, if you've ever used a hand axe or a tomahawk is a throwing axe, being super strong and swinging it really hard generally isn't what you want to do with it anyway. You use the weight and the momentum of the axe head itself. It's the same when using any kind of axe to split wood. It's not that you're putting so much force into it and going, "Rah!" It's actually knowing how to direct the force where you want it. It helps to be a little bit more muscular for something like a large axe. But most of the force comes from centrifugal force of the axe going in this huge thing. So actually making the axe, the hand axe a finesse weapon, I don't have a problem with. I think it makes sense. So those are the class features. Let's dive into the actual class now. At first level, you get Dazzling Dance. This is the defining feature of the class that I was talking about in the beginning. This is actually really interesting. It doesn't exist. There's a lot of potential here. When you use the attack action against a hostile creature, you gain a charge of Dazzling Dance. You may hold a number of Dazzling Dance charges equal to your Charisma modifier. Your charges dissipate 1 minute after combat ends. Additionally, you may spend 1 Dazzling Dance charge to take the dash or disengage action as a bonus action. So, Dazzling Dance is a setup. Dazzling Dance basically is introducing a new mechanic, which is going to be the defining feature of this class. Despite the fact that it's not really used much in the class, in my suggestions, we will use it heavily because it's a great idea. Basically, This class is fueled, and its defining feature is fueled by you using the attack action to fuel other things. That's really interesting. First of all, it allows you a lot of control when you're designing the class to be able to go, okay, well, if we want them to be able to do something as their bonus action, we can just have it require a Dazzling Dance charge, and it'll effectively require them to use the attack action, which means we can limit them using other actions that we don't want to be a part of kind of the core features of the class. And then if something is too powerful, just make it cost multiple Dazzling Dances, because that means that in order to use something that requires maybe 2 Dazzling Dances instead of 1, they actually have to spend 2 turns charging up that ability effectively. And I like that. I think it's really interesting. And like I said, if used correctly, you can create a very unique play style. That's literally nothing else in D&D 5th edition does this. I myself have been experimenting with an idea similar to this, where attacks can actually fuel other abilities. I haven't quite figured it out yet. Yeah, like this is just a really interesting idea. I think has a lot of potential. They kind of forget about it going forward, but we'll get to that. So as far as how to use this effectively means your bonus action, the Dancer is going to be a bonus action heavy class. And because chakrams are their weapon, hand axes are one-handed. They are light weapons. So you can dual wield them. So that means your choice when you're playing this class is, when you have Dazzling Dance charges, are you going to use your bonus action to dash or disengage, kind of do a hit and run thing, which when we get to second level won't really be as big a deal for this as other classes. But it could be a hit and run thing. Do you want to use the do you want to use dash just to be able to move around, be hyper mobile, or do you want to use your bonus action to get an extra hit in there? So yeah, overall, like I said, I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of potential to it. Next, at first level, we get Flourish. Now, as I read this is going to sound oddly familiar. Also beginning at first level, once per turn, you can deal an extra 1d6 damage to one creature you hit with a ranged weapon attack if you have advantage on the attack roll. The attack must use a finesse weapon. You don't need advantage on the attack roll if another enemy of the target is within 5 feet of it. That enemy isn't incapacitated, and you don't have disadvantage on the attack roll. The amount of extra damage increases as you gain levels in this class, is shown in the Flourish damage column of the Dancer to the table. Flourish is sneak attack. It is word for word. They change it so that it requires you to hit this is another thing that's going to really, really upset. You hit with a ranged weapon attack if you have advantage. So here's something interesting. They have already ruled quite a few times, as in Crawford has been asked this specifically. I think Perkins has been asked this specifically. What does a ranged weapon attack mean? Well, it is an attack with a ranged weapon. Well, what is a ranged weapon? Well, ranged weapons are actually defined in the PHB. Ranged weapons are weapons that only can attack at range. Bows and crossbows are ranged weapons. Darts are ranged weapons. Daggers and hand axes are melee weapons with the thrown property. So, according to the definition that they made here, you cannot use Flourish with chakrams, because the chakram is a hand axe with a finesse property, which is a melee weapon, and this requires you to make a you hit with a ranged weapon attack. Now, if you want to say when you hit with a ranged attack, you can say that, but ranged attack itself is actually not defined in D&D 5th edition. But ranged weapon attack is defined. It is defined as an attack with a ranged weapon. So the funny thing about Flourish is it can't be done with any of the weapons that the dancer's proficient in, because they're not proficient in any ranged weapons. Let's look at the proficiencies again. Weapon proficiency: chakrams, melee weapon; rapier, scimitar, short sword. Simple weapons, there are a couple ranged weapons and simple weapons. And then whips. Everything but the generic simple weapons, which every class is proficient in simple weapons. Everything but simple weapons are melee weapons. They cannot do Flourish. Flourish is a defining feature. It's a defining feature of the rogue, but in here it would be a defining feature of the dancer, because that's really, really important. So, yeah, the way this is currently written, Flourish is unusable unless, and I'm actually going to look up because I can't remember what the actual ranged weapons are. So I'm actually going to go to the equipment section. So simple melee weapons, simple range weapons. So the only weapons you can flourish with are crossbows, darts, short bows, and the sling. That's it. The entirety of the rest of the features of this class are proficient weapons of this class. You cannot use the defining feature. Now, why is it that Flourish doesn't allow you to do that, but rogues can use ranged weapons? Well, because rogues, for sneak attack, it doesn't say you hit with a ranged weapon attack. It just says when you hit. I actually have it right here. When we look at sneak attack, once per turn, you can deal extra 1d6 damage to one creature you hit with an attack. It just says an attack, not with a ranged weapon attack. So because they decided to change the wording, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so critical about the words that you use in 5th edition, because the words matter. They have defined specific words so that they don't have to make these really, really wordy, crazy things. And people have asked things like, well, can I use sharpshooter? Can I use sharpshooter when I'm throwing daggers? And the official ruling is no. Sharpshooter requires a ranged weapon attack, and a dagger is a melee weapon. You can make a ranged attack with a melee weapon that has the thrown feature for it. But it is still a melee weapon attack. Because it's a melee weapon you are making an attack with. You're just making it at range. So, yes, I've talked about sneak attack in my rogue videos. If you want to know how to use sneak attack, go look at the rogue. I'm going to say my suggestion for this is get rid of Flourish. Again, we already have a really, really cool ability in a defining feature in Dazzling Dance. We don't need Flourish. Flourish was just put in here, I'm assuming, so that the dancer can actually keep pace with other weapons-based classes as far as damage is concerned, because they don't get extra attack, which is a mistake. So that causes issues with them being able to keep up with damage. So they put in Flourish just so that they could do extra damage. Well, unfortunately, when you add in a feature that's not designed to fit with the rest of these features, you create a broken class. So get rid of Flourish. It doesn't belong here. The next thing they get is Unarmored Defense. That sounds familiar. Why does it sound familiar? Oh, monks and barbarians both get Unarmored Defense. This is taken word for word from the barbarian version of it. And the big difference between monks and barbarian versions is monks can't use shields, barbarians can. That's the only real difference, I believe. Before I say that 100% for certain, because I'm supposed to be an expert on monks, I'm actually going to look at the monk here. Yeah, so the monk specifically says while you're wearing no armor and not wielding a shield, you can use a different thing to your AC equals 10 plus Dex plus Whiz. Barbarian is the same, but it's 10 plus Dex plus Con, and they specifically say you can use a shield and still gain this benefit. So the Dancer gets the same ability as the Barbarian, which is weird. I don't know why they decided to choose the Barbarian version versus the Monk, because the Dancer fits a lot more in line with the Monk than it does the Barbarian. And I don't know why a Dancer would be... like, everything else is built around the idea that this seems to be a dual-wielding class, so it wouldn't use a shield. So I don't understand why they would use that one. As far as how does it fit in the class, it makes sense. Unarmored Defense isn't technically a defining feature because it shows up in multiple classes. But it makes sense for this class. First of all, letting their charisma modifier add into their armor class makes sense. If you think of Dancers as a martial class that is built around the idea of using movement as part of their martial art. One of the martial arts that I have learned about, I tried actually studying it and learning the basics of it. I never had an actual master to teach me, and teaching myself was just not working. But there's a style of martial arts called capoeira. It's a Brazilian martial art. And it's brilliant. But one of the coolest things about capoeira is the ready stance, which is a common thing in every martial art ever. You have a ready stance, or a fighting stance, I guess would be the better word for it, because a ready stance is slightly different. You have a fighting stance. The first martial art I learned was Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art that emphasizes kicks. Their fighting stance is you go... and this is your fighting stance. You have your lead arm up. You have your second arm across your chest. You have both of them in fists because you don't do a ton of open hand techniques in Taekwondo. You technically don't do a lot of punching. And this is how you fight. And this is actually a really common fighting stance. If you look at boxing, your boxing stance is like this. You keep your elbows tucked so you can use them to protect your torso. You keep your gloves up here to protect your head. Every fighting style has a fighting stance. Kung Fu is actually famous for just the plethora of stances that they have for you to learn. Kung Fu, especially modern Kung Fu, is a condition-based martial arts. And what I mean by that, or a conditioning-based martial art, what I mean by that is the thing that makes Kung Fu practitioners so powerful is the conditioning they put their bodies through. If you look at Shaolin monks that are studying Shaolin Kung Fu, they are in unbelievable shape. They have expert control over their muscles, and they can do amazing things because of the control they have over their muscles. And one of the reasons they have that is they have so many stances that are so bizarre and require you to have such perfect control of your muscles. Things like horse stance. Horse stance actually shows up in a bunch of different martial arts, but it is an uncomfortable stance to be in because it requires you to sit down and spread your legs, and you basically in Taekwondo we call it sitting stance. But it's a very solid stance, but it takes a lot out of your thighs. You have to have very good thighs. It is a great way to make it so you can't walk the next day when you train horse stance. So anyway, capoeira has a mobile fighting stance. Their fighting stance is called a ginga. And what it is you literally sway as you step through this basic 4-step pattern where you go forward and back and forward and back. And I can't show off the ginga, first of all, because I'm not very good at it. And second of all, I don't have the room in front of my camera to do it. But that's the Ginga. And because of that, one of the things when learning capoeira is learning how to transition the movement of the Ginga into your various kicks and punches and dodges and all these other things. And it is an incredible martial art. It is an incredible acrobatic style. And so when I think of dancer, I think of capoeira. I think of that mobile style. And because their base fighting stance is mobile, that actually adds into the difficulty of being able to throw a kick. You're generally, when you're in a fight, you're not going to be expecting your opponent to be constantly moving so much. Generally in a fight, even in boxing, if you're doing, kind of the rope-a-dope technique, where you literally just dance around the ring as your opponent just throws punches at you and wears himself out to where he's so tired he can't defend himself, and you just come in and pop, 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 pop. It's a really effective technique if you can trick your opponent into wearing himself out. But even in that one, you're not moving that much. Like, you go around the ring, you stay out of there, but you're not constantly moving. You're just staying just out of range, or you're going just close enough so that they're hitting your gloves or your arms and not doing any damage but tiring themselves out. So that's kind of what I see as how the dancer would act, is they are effectively doing a Ginga as part of their fighting stance. And because of that, having charisma add into your defense makes sense, because charisma is how you do your performance, which is how you do dances and the things like that, among other things in 5th edition. So yeah, sorry for going off of martial arts kick. That's my thing. I like my martial arts. So yeah, the only thing I might change in Unarmored Defense is just getting rid of the shield, because I just don't see a build where using a shield as a dancer would give you any benefits. And it just doesn't fit with the dancer. So use the monk version. Don't use the barbarian version is the only suggestion I would make. Because I don't think the shield's going to be that useful. But otherwise, it fits perfectly. Spellcasting. This is where things get weird. So, again, they already have defining feature from the rogue, which is not a spellcaster. And is a very extremely powerful defining feature. Sneak attack is really, really powerful. It's one of those things that makes the rogue just that far off of being broken. So, in addition to that, we're going to give you spellcasting. The dancer is a half caster. They do not get access to cantrips, it looks like, as far as I can tell. Yeah. So it doesn't say anything about cantrips. So that is a little bit nicer in the fact they don't have access to cantrips. It's not that big a deal, to be blunt. And one of the winning combos when you're min-maxing a rogue is taking the Magic Initiate for the feat and picking any spellcasting class, so Wizard, Sorcerer, or Warlock. All three of them get access to either used to be Thunderblade before they changed it. Now you can go either Thunderblade or Green Flame Blade, because again, sneak attack is triggered whenever you make an attack. So part of casting these spells is you make a weapon attack. So what would happen is if you combine sneak attack with like Green Flame Blade, before level 5 it's not that big a deal. But once you hit level 5, it means your main attack, you get to make, it's just like taking the attack action for the rogue, because they don't get extra attack. It does the same thing as the attack action, but it adds on extra damage, because with Green Flame Blade and Thunderblade, I think it's called, or Thunder something, they level up just like all other cantrips. And one of the things they do is when they level up, they just add on an additional d8 of the damage. So rogues that do that become super, super overpowered, because now they get not only sneak attack, but they also get extra damage from the Skika cantrip, and there's no downside. Taking the attack action makes them do the exact same thing, but they don't get extra damage for it. Because it's a cantrip, and uses doesn't require them to really know any or have a magic skill, because you make a melee attack for the attack roll. So you don't need to actually have a high intelligence if you're taking it from the wizard spell slot. Now, because they already have a charisma, they could literally just take the sorcerer version of it, and they get the best of both worlds. So it's nice that they don't have that built in. Doesn't mean they can't get it. Basically, dancers are spell preparers compared to like wizards and sorcerers, where they learn spells and they have limited. They actually at the finish a long rest. When they finish a long rest, they can choose the spells that they get to prepare from the entire dancer's spell list. So again, just like the druid or the cleric, they can be very customizable if you keep the spellcasting in there. Now, the other thing that makes Dancer unique, which would be a defining feature if it weren't for the fact that my suggestion is just ditch spellcasting because they don't need it. And it's just adding more things to make them broken. They have this thing called dance magic. As a dancer, when you cast a dancer spell, you do not have to fulfill the verbal components of the spell. You must spend 10 feet of movement alongside your spell slot to cast a spell or maintain a spell. So this becomes really weird because dancers can't be silenced because they cast spells through movement. So the verbal components of a spell are translated into their dance. So any spell that requires verbal components, a dancer can cast without using them. And the wording, again, I harp on wording because it's really important. The wording that you use here is you do not have to fulfill the verbal components of a spell. Meaning you can, but it's not necessary. However, the next line is, you must spend 10 feet of movement alongside your spell slot to cast a spell or to maintain a spell. Which means you cannot cast a spell and decide, well, I'm going to use verbal this time. No, you always have to spend 10 feet of movement in order to cast a spell or maintain a spell. So as much as this kind of seems like, oh, well, this is kind of cool, they can actually get around silence into the things like that by just spending 10 feet. No, they always have to spend 10 feet. Whether they use the verbal components or not, they're just not required to use the verbal components, but they always have to use 10 feet of movement, not only to cast a spell, but to maintain concentration on a spell. So, if you want to break a dancer's concentration, grapple them. That's all it takes. Because when their turn comes around, if they can't spend 10 feet of movement to continue concentrating on the spell, they lose it. This is weird to me because it doesn't add any real benefit, but it adds a huge hindrance. The quote-unquote benefit you get is if you are silenced, a dancer can still cast spells. Cool. There's a lot of other ways to cast spells while silenced, though. Like, you can just cast spells that don't require verbal components. There's not a ton of them, but they do exist. You can get out of the field of wherever you are silenced. Or, if you are a sorcerer, or you take the feat that gives you sorcery points and a metamagic thing, you can use subtle spell and cast while silenced. So it's not that there aren't abilities that exist that allow you to cast spells while silenced. So that's not that big a thing, and silence is just not something that happens a ton in 5th edition. Like, I have a character who has the silence spell, and it's remarkably cheap. It only takes 2 key points for me to cast it. I've used it once. Now, when I did use it, it was super awesome, and we got the DM to literally leave the table. We got the DM to effectively rage quit because my silence spell broke the end boss because it was a spellcaster that couldn't cast any spells. It was hilarious. So, yes, there are certain situations where silence is useful, but they're kind of exceptions to the rules. In the 3 or 4 years that I played Aether, I used the silence spell I think twice. Once, and one of those uses, or no, I didn't use it because I wasn't playing Aether in that adventure. Yeah, I've used him once. Yeah, silence isn't that big a thing. But now you are severely limited in your ability to cast spells because you always have to be able to spend 10 feet of movement in order to cast them. So the grappled condition presents a very real problem for the Dancer that no other class has any real problem with. So yeah, and again, the Dancer in Final Fantasy XIV is a physical DPS class. Doesn't use magic. I don't know why they added magic into this, other than, again, let's just take abilities and shove them together. Overall, I don't really see why, especially when we get to level 13. This isn't technically a half caster. This class can cast spells all the way up to, I believe, level 7 or 8. They just have a very strange way of doing spellcasting above level 5. So, yeah, overall, spellcasting doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The spellcasting focus you can use are bangles, anklets, or other jewelry inlaid with gemstones. So, wands, basically anything that you could get that would add to your spellcasting, like a wand of the war wizard, war mage, or things like that, you cannot use as a dancer. Which is another reason why creating special spell focuses or foci for classes is fine, but you also have to understand that magic items that are specifically tailored to spellcasters will not work for them because they can't use the foci that other spellcasters can use. So remember that. So yeah, overall, it's spellcasting. They're half casters. They don't need it by any. There's no reason for effectively a rogue to also be a half caster that can also cast up to 7th or 8th level spells. Like there's just no reason for that. It just feels like they were piling in random things to try and make something cool, and it didn't work. That was at 2nd level, by the way. The other thing that's weird about Unarmored Defense, Unarmored Defense is not listed on the Dancer table, so you don't actually know when you get Unarmored Defense. I think it's supposed to be a 1st level ability. It would make sense for it to be a 1st level ability, but it actually doesn't say anywhere in the document. So, Soren, if you're reading this, put something, either list Unarmored Defense on the Dancer table, or just going, also at 1st level, blah blah. So people know when they get Unarmored Defense. The other thing you get at 2nd level is called Whirling Steel. You can spend 1 hour attuning your recently discovered magics with up to 2 finesse throwing weapons. When you throw a weapon you are attuned with, it returns to your hand after the attack is resolved. Part of me wonders if the entire reason they gave them spellcasting was to justify Whirling Steel. To say, oh, it's magic because they can cast spells. Which I think is really dumb. Whirling Steel, on the other hand, I think is really cool. It does mean that finesse throwing weapons, unless you are using darts, which is the only weapon that will actually allow them to use Whirling Steel, because that is the only finesse throwing ranged weapon. Trust me, I've checked. So unless you're using darts, Whirling Steel can be useful in a lot of different things. It doesn't work with Flourish because of how it's written. Overall, I like Whirling Steel. Again, I like the idea of a thrown weapon-based character, a Gambit-style character. I built a Battlemaster fighter that uses playing cards that are just darts. They use the stat block for darts. I just call them throwing cards. And that's all it is it's just a flavor text, but they're darts. And it's a super, super cool thing. And I really, really enjoy it. So having something that allows you to do that. The only quote-unquote issue I have with this is it does... Artificers have an infusion they can make that will make a throwing weapon come back to you. And it is It is something unique to the Artificer. And before the Artificer, it didn't exist in D&D other than the Dwarven Thrower was the only ranged weapon that could come back. If you wanted to be a throwing weapon-based character, you had to have a Dwarven Thrower. The Artificer made it so that you could basically turn anything into a Dwarven Thrower. This effectively means that you have that ability without having to use an infusion. Now, the big difference with this being Whirling Steel only works for the Dancer, whereas the infusion, the Artificer can infuse a weapon and give it to anybody. So just having the Artificer in your party gives you access to that if they take that infusion, whereas the Dancer doesn't. And because in Final Fantasy XIV they use chakrams for this, it's kind of necessary. So get rid of the reference to magic, because this class doesn't need magic, and keep Whirling Steel as their second level ability. That will be your second defining ability, is Whirling Steel. So as far as defining features of this class, the defining features should be Dazzling Dance, which is super awesome, and Whirling Steel, which effectively means they get to be a ranged character. And can mess around with that, and actually can do things that a lot of other ranged characters can't, because they get to bring it. They get to reuse thrown weapons, whereas any other thrown weapon, you have to go pick it up to be able to use it again, like daggers and things like that. You have to go and pick them up to be able to throw them again. So yeah, I like Whirling Steel. I think it can create really fun, interesting characters. At third level, you choose your archetype. We'll do a different video for each one of the archetypes, just like I always do. The archetypes are the Paragon, the Exotic Wonder, and the Peacebringer. I'm going to tell you right now, the Paragon effectively gets kind of a pseudo bardic inspiration. The Peacebringer is a paladin, and it gets lay on hands. So again, takes a defining feature and just shoves it into another class. This time it's a subclass. And then the Exotic Wonder is an attack-based class, which is what kind of should be the base class itself. But allows your melee weapon attacks to activate Flourish. So the Exotic Wonder lets you be a regular rogue. And then fourth level, you get ability score improvement. We all know about that. Improve your ability scores, take a feat. Next. At fifth level, you get Uncanny Dodge. No changing the name of it like they did with Flourish. This is literally just the fifth level ability from rogues. Uncanny Dodge, which is a uniquely rogue thing. It's not a defining feature because it shows up too late, but it's something that only rogues get unless you're a dancer. And it basically means you can use your reaction to have damage against you. It's really useful for the rogue. At seventh level, you get Evasion, another rogue feature. Now, Evasion shows up in a couple other classes. Monks get it. Hunter Rangers get it as well. But they get it significantly later. I think monks get it, I think, at level 9. And Hunter Rangers don't get it until much later, I believe. But yeah, again, it's just taken directly from the rogue. That's all it is. Just give him the rogue. At 10th level, you get something different. You get Motivating Mambo. When you use the help action, you can expend 1 Dazzling Dance charge to add your Charisma modifier to the roll. Additionally, you may spend 1 Dazzling Dance charge to use the help action as a bonus action. First of all, this is written backwards. The way this should be, because the dance action, or the help action is an action. So you have to choose to help instead of flourishing or casting a spell, so you're generally never going to do that. However, Motivating Mambo gives you the ability to do it as a bonus action by burning a Dazzling Dance, which massively changes how the class is played at that point. Because again, before, you would use your action to attack, which would build up a Dazzling Dance, which then you could use to dash or disengage. So that would give you hypermobility. At 10th level, now your bonus action can turn into a help, which is an extremely undervalued ability. Now, the one thing with the help action is, and I'm going to bring up the player's handbook for this again. Actions in combat. Help. When you take the help action, the creature you aid gains advantage on the next ability check. It makes a performance task, where it makes attacks. So that's the out of combat. Alternatively, you can aid a friendly creature in attacking a creature within 5 feet of you. You feint, distract the target, or in some other way team up to make your ally's attack more effective. If your ally attacks the target before your next turn, the first attack roll is made with advantage. So the help action is really, really useful. However, the help action requires you to be within 5 feet of the target. The dancer is a ranged attacker to the point where Flourish only works when you attack with ranged weapons. So motivating Mambo is useless because you have to use your bonus action to use the help action, but you have to be within 5 feet, which bare minimum means your attack rolls are going to have disadvantage because you need to be making ranged weapon attacks, which you can only make with a ranged weapon, which you can only attack at range. And if you attack something at range, if you make a ranged weapon attack when you have an enemy within 5 feet of you, you may get with disadvantage, meaning you can't use Flourish. So yeah, motivating Mambo is a cool idea. It's backwards. They should have help action as a bonus action first, and then additionally, you can spend another Dazzling dice to add your charisma modifier to their roll. So that should be flipped. But it also needs to be modified. And I think it would be really, really simple. You just add, after it says you may spend one Dazzling dice charge to use the help action as a bonus action. When you spend a Dazzling Dance charge to use the help action as a bonus action, the target you are the target can let's just say the target can be up to 20 feet away, because that's the short range of hand axes, which is what your chakrams are. So that'd be the only thing like that. Additionally, you may spend one Dazzling Dice charge to use the help action as a bonus action. When you use a Dazzling Dance charge to use the help action as a bonus action, the target can be up to 20 feet away. The target can be up to 20 feet away from you. Yeah, I can't think right now to come up with the right wording, but that's what it should say, and that would be really cool, and it would be super, super fun, and it would make the dancer so much cooler. But it's poorly worded, and so it doesn't actually work with anything. Going to 13th level, you get Bewildering Grace. This is the most screwed up thing I've ever seen. So Bewildering Grace, use an action to perform, so you can't use any of your defining features with his ability. You can't Flourish, because that requires you to make an attack. You can't use Dazzling Dance, because that requires the attack action. You can't cast any spells, because you got to use Bewildering Grace and cast these spells in action, unless there's a few spells you can cast a bonus action. There's not many. So this is another thing that doesn't fit with the rest of it, and it's super weird. Basically, this allows you to cast certain spells or do weird shit. You could use this feature a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, which by 13th level is 5. You regain any expended uses when you finish a long rest. So these are some of the things you can do. There's 20 different things you can do. You cast the first one. You cast the banishment spell on yourself. You cannot end the spell early, but return to where you were at the end of the spell's duration. So you get banished to a demiplane. 2, you become petrified for 1 round of combat. Petrified isn't a condition in 5th edition. It is in Final Fantasy, but there is no petrified condition in the D&D. And so I thought maybe they just created a new condition because petrified is a big deal in Final Fantasy in general. And I looked through this. If someone is more familiar with this document than I am, let me know in the comments down below. But I did not see a definition of petrified anywhere in the document. So you become petrified for 1 round of combat means nothing because petrified isn't a thing, as far as I can tell. So if somebody wants to define that, it would make sense to define petrified in here because petrified is mentioned in other classes as well, and it just doesn't exist in 5th edition D&D. It is not a condition. So just defining petrified somewhere in one of the appendices would make perfect sense and would help a lot. But for right now, you become petrified means nothing. Another one is lights and weird stuff happens. All creatures within a 20-foot radius center of you make a dex save or get knocked prone. Another one is wisdom save or become blinded. Con save or become poisoned. You cast fairy fire centered on you, but you're excluded. You cast cause fear on an ally. You cast the invisibility spell, hold person spell, magic weapon spell, mass healing word spell. Choose a creature within 30 feet. They make a con save. They gain a level of exhaustion. That's super, super powerful. 14 maxes your Dazzling Dance charges. 15, cast Insect Blade. 16 is Mask Your Wounds. 17 is cast Otto's Irresistible Dance. 18, cast the Heal spell. 19, cast Mordenkainen's Sword. And 20, you cast Reverse Gravity. So, of the 20 different things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 have you casting a spell. Bewildering Gaze allows you to cast spells and become more than a half-caster, despite the fact that you're already a half-caster. A few of these are negative for you. Banishing yourself is a negative effect for you if you roll a nat 1 on your 20. That kind of sucks. Most of the rest are beneficial. So it's not like I think this was attempting to emulate like the Wild Magic table for sorcerers. But again, the Wild Magic table, the entire Wild Magic class is built around the Wild Magic table. And it is not something they can activate whenever they want. It's something that activates under very specific conditions that the DM generally controls more so than the player themselves. So that's a natural balancing thing. This, they just get to do it. So many of these, like again, Mordenkainen's Sword is a 7th level spell. Reverse Gravity, I might be wrong on this. I'm going to look it up real quick here because I can't remember. I believe Reverse Gravity is an 8th level spell. Let's see. Reverse Gravity is a 7th level spell. Is Mordenkainen's in the 8th? Mordenkainen's Hound, Private Sanctum. No, so they're both 7th level spells. So they're 7th level spells, but that still means a half caster can cast 7th level spells, which is really, really powerful. Again, the limiting factor of a half caster is they can only cast up to 5th level spells, and they only ever get 2 5th level spells, to the point where you don't get your first 5th level spell slot until 17th level. At 13th level, you have just gotten your first 4th level spell slot, but you can now cast 7th level spells. Doesn't work. The whole thing, again, it feels like it was designed to be something along the lines of kind of a, again, harkening back to the idea of the dancer being kind of an RNG based class, and like earlier versions of dancers where you weren't quite sure what they were going to do, and sometimes the things they would do would be kind of pointless. Maybe that's what it's referencing, but it's just so, it's so broken. Again, you have about a 50% chance of casting a spell of a level above your ability to cast for ever. You can never cast any of these spells normally. So yeah, you can't consider this, despite the fact that it is based on a roll of the die. You cannot consider this you can't consider this a half caster when they can cast 7th level spells. So this is now like a 3/4 caster, which is not something that exists. And it massively unbalances the class because now they have the rogue sneak attack, they have the barbarian's unarmored defense, they are now a 3/4 caster. And then they also have uncanny dodge and evasion, and then this weird motivating mambo thing that doesn't really work. Like, they literally just have all these different things, none of which gel with each other. Nothing reinforces or works with it. It's just random abilities that were kind of slammed together that don't work. Yeah. Going to 14th level, you get Spell Dancer. When you cast a spell, you get a number of Dazzling Dance charges equal to half the level of the expended spell slot. You do not gain Dazzling Dance charges from Bewildering Grace. So you even mention that Bewildering Grace is another way to cast spells. This is interesting because now spellcasting actually works with Dazzling Dance. Doesn't help with Flourish needing you to make attacks that you can't do. But yeah, that at least reinforces a defining feature of this. And gives you more of an incentive to be able to cast spells more often. But with you being a half caster, you're not going to want to cast spells as often. So this really feels like an appeasement of, okay, we know you want to use the half caster features, but we've created this class in a way that really de-incentivizes you to ever use half casting, because Flourish is almost always going to do more damage. So now we're going to allow you to do some casting and be able to give you something, despite the fact that the only thing you can do with your Dazzling Dance charges is dash, disengage, or help in a really weird way that's not going to work. So it doesn't really help anything, but now at least you have an excuse for why you're casting a spell in combat. At 18th level, you get Stage Presence. Attackers cannot attack you with advantage unless you're under the conditions grappled, incapacitated, paralyzed, or petrified. Additionally, when knocked prone, it only costs 5 feet of movement to get back up. This is a dancer ability. The only issue I have with it is petrified isn't a thing. But beyond that, it's a cool ability. You can't have someone get advantage on an attack roll against you unless you're grappled, incapacitated, paralyzed, or petrified. This is different than other abilities that exist in 5th edition, where opponents don't get advantage from you not being able to see them or things like that. This is literally attackers cannot attack you with advantage unless you're under these conditions. Because of that, it is a very, very powerful ability because it removes so many things from your enemies. However, it's an 18th level ability. It should be powerful. And it fits with the idea of the dancer. I mentioned before how my Shadow Monk Aether is immune to grapples, quote unquote. And what I mean by that is as long as I'm in dim light or darkness, I can shadow step outside of any grapple I'm in. So I'm effectively immune to grapples. This is kind of the same thing. They're immune to advantage. It's super, super powerful. But with how screwed up this class is already, it's nice to have something that just works. It fits with the class. It makes sense. It's a really useful ability. It means you can play the class really, really aggressively, doing things that might normally cause an enemy to give advantage on you, like doing things like going into a place and casting Fairy Fire, or getting hit with Fairy Fire. You're effectively immune to Fairy Fire with this. Again, it happens at 18th level, so most players aren't going to get a chance to use it, but when you get this, you can play a very, very aggressive dancer. When you combine this with the ability to dash or disengage as a bonus action, you can really do a lot of cool things with stage presence. So I like this. I think it's a really cool ability. I think it's an 18th level ability. It's great. The only issue with it is Petrified isn't a thing. So as soon as Petrified is defined as a condition, it becomes that much more useful. Up until then, being grappled, incapacitated, or paralyzed are bad conditions already. I do find it interesting that they don't have restrained on here as a condition, because restrained is a condition. And I just have to see really quickly, because every time they talk about grappled, they also talk about... Yeah, so restrained doesn't give the grappled condition. So that would be the only other thing I'd put in here is grappled, restrained, incapacitated, paralyzed, or petrified. Just because restrained is like an uber version of a good grapple. And the one real benefit of being restrained is attack rolls have advantage against you, and this would mean that the restrained condition doesn't give its biggest benefit to them. When it really should, because restrained is literally grappled with extra things that happen to it. Grapple just means your speed is a 0. So, anyway, so that's the 18th level ability. I think it's cool. Finally, at 20th level, you get Rhythmic Heart. When you roll initiative, you gain 2 Dazzling Dance charges. Normally, I'm not a fan of abilities that just give you limited resources, unless they say if you start with 0 you get. But because dancing Dazzling Dance charges go away after a minute, there really isn't a danger of someone like stockpiling Rhythmic Heart charges by getting into a bunch of small fights and just banking them effectively. So yeah, and again, that means you're going to be able to use... Currently, with the fact that the only thing Dazzling Dance charges are useful for is using the help action or disengaging and dodging, there's really no reason to almost ever use them by 20th level. But when we talk about the rework, there will be reasons. So, I think it's time to go for final thoughts. Like I said in the beginning, this class is a mess. Is a Rogarian caster, which doesn't make a lot of sense. It is a 3/4 caster, which doesn't exist outside of this class. It is really weird. Most of the abilities fight against each other. It just randomly takes stuff from... Like, it's mostly a rogue. Takes the Barbarian Unarmored Defense. It gives them half casting like a paladin. And then Bewildering Grace is just a mess. So... to fix this, first things first, Dazzling Dance 100% needs to be a defining feature, because it's so cool and it's so interesting. And it really fits with the idea of the dancer in Final Fantasy XIV. You do attacks to kind of proc other things. Well, procs don't really exist in 5th edition, but building a charge whenever you take the attack action would work for that. And I think that's really interesting and fun. So yeah, Dazzling Dance, go ahead and keep that as your defining feature. We're going to add on to it because you need more uses of Dazzling, or more uses for your Dazzling Dance charges than just Dazzling Disengage. Effectively, Dazzling Dash is meant to replace Cunning Action for the Rogue. We're going to change that. So Dazzling Dance, we're going to keep. Flourish, throw out. They don't need it. Unarmored Defense, like I said, just switch to the monk version because they don't need shields. Spellcasting, throw out. Whirling Steel, we're going to keep at 2nd level. So Unarmored Defense and Dazzling Dance are going to be your 1st level abilities. That also means they don't need proficiency in light armor. So you can toss out that proficiency. So 1st level is going to be Dazzling Dash, Unarmored Defense. 2nd level is going to be Whirling Steel, because it's fine going 1st to 2nd level. And then the other thing we're going to add is taken directly from Final Fantasy XIV, and that is closed position. This could be such a cool class if we take one of the most interesting parts of the dancer from Final Fantasy XIV and putting it in here, which is closed position. Closed position lets you pick a dance partner. And the way it's going to work in D&D 5th edition is your dance partner can use your Dazzling Dance charges for the same, or will get benefits when you burn Dazzling Dance charges. So right now, all you can do at first level is dash or disengage with your Dazzling Dance charge, which ain't great. But if we take Motivating Mambo, which is a really cool ability, but it shows up at level 10, meaning it's not that useful because it shows up way later. Let's shift Motivating Mambo down and add it in to this closed position. So it's a second level ability. So part of closed position is you can, as a bonus action, you declare a dance partner. That person remains your dance partner for a minute. So already starting with, okay, bonus action. We're going to make this bonus action heavy kick a glass. Your dance partner gets special benefits whenever you burn a Dazzling Dance. One of those benefits is whenever you burn a Dazzling Dance charge, your partner has an advantage on the first attack roll they make against the last creature you have hit with your attack action. It sounds complicated, but basically, anytime you use Dazzling Dance, your dance partner is going to get the benefit effectively of the help action against whoever you have attacked. So now, kind of the core thing that you're going to be doing as the dancer is you make an attack, burn a Dazzling Dance to charge, and that's going to give your ally advantage on their next attack, their first attack roll against this. You're effectively using the help action every time you burn a Dazzling Dancer charge. Now, the one issue with that is you really only have disengage and dash, so there's not a ton of benefit to doing that. So as the class gets more levels, we're going to give it more uses. One of those uses is going to be built into each of the subclasses, which when we go in the subclasses, we'll talk about that. But effectively, every subclass, when you get them at 3, is going to have a new way to use your Dazzling Dance, which is how a subclass should work. It takes a defining feature and lets you do that. And because of that, it's going to have a different way to interact with the closed position. So right now, closed position is just effectively giving you the help action as free. But it only works with your dance partner. We'll deal with doing other things later. But for right now. So that's what we've done there. Third level, we don't need to do anything. Dancer's Archetype. Fourth level, don't need to do anything. Ability score improvement. For fifth level, we don't need Uncanny Dodge. That's a rogue thing. We don't need it. There's going to be other things that they can do. Rogues have to get much closer than most dancers are going to need to, and dancers already have other cool things. What we're going to do with Uncanny Dodge is we're going to change it to extra attack. So now dancers can attack twice. And I think I'm going to change the wording on closed position. They get advantage on their first attack roll against any enemy the dancer has attacked within the last round. So when we add to Uncanny Dodge, or when we replace Uncanny Dodge with with extra attack, that now means they can effectively mark 2 different targets that their ally can now attack and have an advantage against. So yeah, get rid of Uncanny, dodge, which is a rogue thing, turn it into extra attack, and now things are starting to work together. This is how class design works in 5th edition, is later abilities should build on the features of earlier abilities, and this expands how useful your close position is going to be. At 7th level, giving them evasion, there's probably something better. I would like to see 7th level replaced with another use for your dancing die, or your dancing thingies, your charges. It's sorry, there's too many D's in that, and there's too many hard consonants, so saying it with a stutter is a pain in the ass. So anyway, your charges. So instead of evasion, we give a new way to use the charges in specifically for close position to give them some sort of benefits. So now you can use. You know what? Let's leave it at evasion right now, because again, it's not exclusive to that. The fact they get it at 7th level. Oh, that's what we can do. We can flip flop things. This will be easier. Put motivating Mambo up to evasion. I know we said we changed that. Give me a second. We took ideas from motivating Mambo. We're going to put motivating Mambo at 7th level, evasion at 10th level. So now rogues still get it first, which is how it's supposed to be. And then motivating Mambo, we just turn into a 7th level ability. Again, we make that suggestion that we make that change that I recommended, where once you get motivating Mambo, you can use your dancing dice at arranged for an enemy by burning a charge for it. So yeah, and because your dance partner already gets the benefit of a help, that effectively means that Dazzling Dance to charge can be used to get another ally aid on this. So anytime you burn a charge, your closed position person is going to get a benefit against anyone that you've attacked. Using motivating Mambo, now you can get another person to have advantage. So yeah, really kind of building on that idea of kind of buffing and being beneficial. Again, at 10th level, we're going to turn that into evasion. 13th level, for Bewildering Grace, ditch it. I don't think it makes sense. It's just messy and weird, and it doesn't. Again, since we've already gotten rid of spellcasting, it's just not there. For 13th level, we're gonna give another way to use your charges. I don't know what it is right now. It's very, very late. But what I'm thinking is being able to give some other benefit that will affect other people differently than how's it? This would be just super easy. You can burn a Dazzling Dance charge as a bonus action to add. To make things simple, to add a d6 to any weapon attacks you make that turn. Again, this will need to be play tested. Your dance partner can add your trying to think here. I'm thinking your dance partner can add your charisma modifier to their damage rolls until the start of your next turn when you use that particular thing. So Bewildering Grace turns into a buff for you. You can burn a charge give yourself extra damage on your attacks. And then your dance partner, because you burned a charge, they're going to get advantage on their first attack. And they get your charisma modifier as bonus to the damage. Doesn't sound massively broken. Sounds kind of cool. Awesome. Going to 14th levelers. Spell Dancer is just an additional way to build Dazzling Dance charges. You don't really need them at this point. I have no idea what to do with the 14th level. It doesn't need to be Spell Dancer because we've taken the spellcasting out of this. So coming up with another ability would be cool, and I can't think of it right now. And then Stage Presence and Rhythmic Heart don't need to be modified at all. They work perfectly fine. So the only thing we really don't have is something for 14th level. You guys are brilliant enough, and Soren themselves is brilliant enough to come up with something different than what it has there. Trying to think if this is something else, because everything thus far has been really built around those Dazzling Dance, and I don't really think you need. Because thus far, we've had nothing in here that we've made cost more than one Dazzling Dance charge. So there's no real reason to be able to gain more Dazzling Dance charms, because that just means you won't be using your attack action. And this class is built around using the attack action a lot. So yeah, I'd rather see some kind of benefit that you could give to your allies. Maybe another charge ability, something just to spitball something. To give you an example of kind of what I'm thinking of, 14th level, as a bonus action, you can burn a charge so that any creature that you hit with a weapon attack is knocked back 5 feet. So that means, so for that turn, you burn your bonus action. You can move, as long as you move around, you can move a target effectively up to 10 feet because you have extra attack. And then your dance partner, when you burn that bonus action, can use their reaction to move up to their speed without provoking an opportunity attack. So you can see how they kind of interact. And then Stage Presence and Rhythmic Heart. So that's my idea for this class. Like I said, overall, I think the idea of Dazzling Dance is super cool. I really hate the name because it's really hard to say what this is a stutter. So I would be super happy, especially since I don't see the term Dazzling Dance anywhere in the dancer in Final Fantasy XIV. I'm looking at every single ability they have, and I do not see that ability anywhere. So ditch that name. Call it literally anything else. Call it En Avant. That's a thing in there, or something. Just don't call it Dazzling Dance, because that's super hard to say. And then you have to use a Dazzling Dance to charge. Just call it something else. It's so hard to say. But beyond that, like I said, as written, this is a Rogarian Naladin. And then the subclasses add additional classes to it, and it doesn't need to be. This is there are so many cool things that are in here that could be expanded to something cool, and it just turns into something really messy. Now, the suggestion I have made, none of that stuff has been playtested, so obviously some things may need to be changed as playtesting occurs. You may need to actually make some things cost 2 charges instead of 1 or something, because they're really powerful. But the class that I pitched is unique, is different, and actually fits into 5th edition class design much better than the current class does. Because right now the current class doesn't work. There are contradictions in terms in the class itself. The features themselves fight against each other. You are basically constantly going to have to be choosing on how to handicap yourself in this class, whether you're going to not build up your charges, or whether you're not going to use your flourish, or whether you're always choosing what is the least bad option instead of what is the best option. And it's just not great. But yeah, so in the comments down below, yeah, this is just, sorry, I am so exhausted. If you can't tell, there is a new bookcase behind me. I finally built my third bookcase, and it was an exhausting, horrible process. So I'm kind of wiped, but that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and turn notifications on. But please, all of those are very important. In the comments down below, let me know if you have other ideas for Dazzling Dance charge uses. Because like I said, when I cover the other classes, or the subclasses, I mean, I'm going, the third level ability is going to be a new Dazzling Dance charge thing, and is going to interact with the Dance Partner ability thing. I don't know why they call it Closed Dance at all in the game, when it should be called Dance Partner, but whatever. You know, Yoshi P's amazing, so whatever his decision and how to do that, I'm fine with that. But yeah, in the comments below, let me know of other things you think would be cool uses for the Dazzling Dance charges. So like I said, I think that needs to be the defining feature of this. And then the second defining feature needs to be that Dance Partner, because that would be super, super cool. And whomever you choose to be your dance partner is going to have a pretty important thing. I'll also... yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today. I'll see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye.